All right, so when you think about education, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's the mainstream, right? You know, the big universities, all those standardized tests, the big policies coming from the top. We're kind of programmed to look right at the center of everything.
But here's the thought. What if the really big ideas, the ones that could actually change things, aren't in the center at all? What if the most important stuff is happening out on the edges? You know, in those spaces and with those people we just don't look at very often. That's the huge question we're going to dig into today.
And it turns out there's a new journal dedicated to doing just that. It's called the Journal of Education on the Margins, and its whole reason for being is built on this one powerful idea, that those overlooked spaces, that's exactly where we should be focusing our attention.
And you've got to hear their mission statement. It's fantastic. Right from the editor's welcome, they say they're here to shine a light on learners and teachers who defy conventional narratives. I love that. They're searching for those transformative practices that happen outside the mainstream. It's a really bold statement, and it basically forces you to ask, are we looking for answers in the right places?
So the journal is basically broken down into two main parts. Let's jump into the first one. This section is all about academic research from people who are working right inside the system, but they're pushing back and challenging those old, traditional ideas about education.
Okay, so we've got four key thinkers here. There's Dr. Emma Carroll, who's digging into empathy in these new technological universities. Then you have Dr. Patricia Kennedy, who's completely rethinking adult literacy. Dr. Michael Toomey is making this incredible case for using vulnerability as a teaching tool. And Catherine Daly is looking at emotional intelligence for school leaders. Now, these might sound like separate topics, but as we go, you'll see they all share this powerful common thread. It's all about emotion and human connection.
And Dr. Carroll's work is so relevant right now. See, Ireland has these new technological universities, and they're attracting a super diverse group of students. We're talking mature students, apprentices, single parents, you name it. And her argument is that with student isolation on the rise, empathy can't just be a nice-to-have thing. Nope, it needs to be a core tool, something built right into the way we teach. She calls it relational pedagogy, which is really just about making the relationship between the teacher and student the top priority, so everyone feels like they belong and has a real shot at success.
This connects perfectly to what Dr. Michael Toomey is getting at. You know the old model, right? The professor up on a pedestal, the all-knowing, distant expert. Well, he throws that out the window. He says there's something way more powerful for today's students. When a teacher is willing to be vulnerable, to admit they don't know something or to share a struggle, it completely shatters that pedestal. It builds real trust. The teacher becomes, a flawed human being, just like the students. And that's what creates a space where everyone feels they truly belong.
And that whole idea of being human and building trust, it flows right into Catherine Daly's research. She looks at school principals and this massive amount of emotional labor they do. Think about it. It's that invisible, exhausting work of managing their own feelings while also managing the feelings of all their staff and students, especially when things go wrong. What she found is that emotional intelligence isn't some soft skill. It is the absolute foundation, the bedrock, for creating the kind of trust and resilience a school community needs to get through anything.
This theme of emotion gets really personal with Dr. Patricia Kennedy's work. She basically says, we've been getting adult literacy all wrong. We treat it like it's just a technical skill to be learned. But for so many people, the real problem is these huge emotional walls: shame, fear, feeling like a failure from when they were kids in school. So what's the big takeaway from all four of these researchers? It's simple, but it's huge. You just can't separate learning from feeling. If you want to really educate someone, you have to connect with the whole person. Okay, so that's the view from inside the classroom walls. But now the journal does something really cool. In part 2, it takes us completely outside of the traditional institutions. We're going to look at education and research that is actually being led by communities themselves.
The main tool they use for this is something called Participatory Action Research, or PAR for short. And this is a game changer. It totally flips the script on how research is usually done. Instead of a bunch of academics coming in from the outside to study a community, PAR puts the power in the hands of the community members. They become the co-researchers. They use their own life experiences to look into the problems that affect them. I mean, this is so important, especially for groups who are tired of being studied to death without anything actually changing for them.
So, the journal highlights 3 amazing projects that use this PAR approach. One is with the Irish Traveller community, another takes place inside a Dublin prison, and the third is all about helping young people in Limerick.
Let's take a closer look at the Traveller Education Change Project. This is incredible. Members of the Traveller community were actually trained as peer researchers. Their mission? To investigate the systemic problems and inequities that their own kids face in school.
So when you see data like this, it's not just a bunch of numbers. It's the powerful result of a community grabbing the reins and telling its own story on its own terms.
And the personal impact of this? It's just wow. Listen to this quote from one of those traveler peer researchers. It says everything. This isn't just about research. It's about finding your power. It's about changing as a person. And it's about finally having a voice that, for way too long, nobody was listening to.
The next project is just as mind-blowing. It's called the Story Exchange, and it brings together inmates from Mountjoy Prison and students from a local university. The process sounds simple, but its effect is profound. They get into pairs, they each share a personal story, and then, and this is the genius part, they have to retell their partner's story, but in the first person, as if it happened to them. Can you imagine? It's this act of radical empathy. It's about literally walking a mile in someone else's shoes and breaking down every wall between them.
And finally, we have Engage in Education down in Limerick. This one is really a story about sticking with it. It shows how a long-term, grassroots project, led by the community itself, can help young people smash through the barriers that keep them out of higher education. It's a perfect example of how local, sustained effort can make a massive difference.
Okay, so we've looked at these two big sections of the journal, one from inside the system and one from the community on the outside. So what's the big picture? What happens when you put all these ideas together? What are they really trying to tell us?
And here it is. This is the heart of the whole journal. It's making the case that these margins we've been talking about, the older student, the adult just learning to read, the person in prison, the traveler kid, these are not places that are lacking something. They're not places of deficit, far from it. They are the exact places where you find the deepest insights, the most creative new ideas, and just unbelievable courage.
The journal's chief editor, Dr. Dan O'Sullivan, nails it in his introduction. He says, the periphery is not a place of deficit, but one of insight. Just think about that for a second. That one sentence changes everything. It tells us that if we're serious about making education better, we have to stop staring at the center and start paying attention to what's happening on the edges.
Which leaves us with one last really important question to chew on. How would our own view of education change? What would happen to our schools, our policies, if we actually committed to this idea? If we stopped trying to fix things from the top down, and instead we just started by listening, really listening, to the voices on the margins? That's the challenge this journal throws down, and honestly, taking it seriously could change absolutely everything.